Megan Blake has a degree in law from the University of Melbourne and a PhD in hermeneutics and interpretation from Monash University. She has worked in policy, research and project management and has taught at secondary and tertiary levels. Megan's advocacy and volunteer work has focused on women's rights and refugee support, and she is currently working with the Feminist Legal Clinic in its representation of the Lesbian Action Group regarding an application for a single-sex exemption under the Commonwealth Sex Discrimination Act. Alicia Staines has run some of Australia's biggest maternity campaigns, including the Bush Baby campaign. She is passionate about women having access to local maternity services. As a result of some of her campaigning, she's had governments direct over $100 million into maternity services in the last 12 months. Her organisation helped set up the New South Wales Birth Trauma Inquiry, and she regularly provides advice and submissions to government on how to improve maternity services for women. Thank you for being here, everyone. And I would like to start off by inviting Megan to speak. Megan, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm here. June has been a big month for TERF news. So I'm just here to give a June update that I've called So Long June and Thanks for All the Fish. So on the 8th of June, Natasha was re-elected to the UN CEDAW committee. So the CEDAW committee is made up of 23 independent experts from around the world, and their job is to monitor the implementation of CEDAW in member states. So that means Dr. Spoyer is not acting as a representative of Australia, but she is the only member from the Pacific region. So arguably easier for Australian lobbyists and government to access, and perhaps more aware of and sympathetic to local issues. In an interview in 2023, however, Dr. Spoyer argued that advances in gender equality have been unequally spread since her time in Parliament. She said, "These experiences are compounded for women of colour, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, lesbian and trans women, and for women with disabilities." At the 2018 Chief Executive Women Annual Conference, talking about harmful gender stereotypes holding women back, she said the same sentence. Her second term with CEDAW commences on the 1st of January 2025 when this one ends. In other news, Teddy Cook has announced resignation from ACON as Community Health Director. No reasons were disclosed and there seems to be no immediate plan for future work, but it's unclear whether this is related to the recent Billboard Chris case, where Chris Elston in February shared a Daily Mail article about Cook, who also works on a WHO gender guidelines panel and works with the UN, and tweeted about Cook's self-publicised interests in bondage fetish behaviours and other things such as drug use. The e-Safety Commissioner sent a removal notice to Elston with the threat of a $782,000 fine. It was classified as cyber abuse. The notice said that the tweet was intended to cause serious harm to the complainant because the material misgendered the complainant and reiterated that the point was deliberate, which was likely intended to invalidate and mock the complainant's gender identity. The material also contained a statement that implicitly equated transgender identity with a psychiatric condition. In a parliamentary hearing on the 30th of May, the e-Safety Commissioner was questioned about this. Liberal Senator Claire Chandler asked her about the office's enforcement of pronoun usage and how that sat alongside the fact that a violent rapist can be housed in a women's prison and called she. The Commissioner replied, "I fail to see the connection." The Commissioner also admitted a potential conflict of interest with her prior relationship with ACON, but said she did not know Cook personally. The case is ongoing with Billboard Chris. However, Cook will be finishing up at ACON after 12 years. The Victorian government has just launched an ad campaign designed by trans and gender diverse people called The Unsaid Says a Lot. It includes videos, for instance, of a man who identifies as a trans woman entering an elevator and the woman inside it appearing uncomfortable and exiting the elevator before the doors close. The woman is depicted as making the trans woman feel unsafe. The campaign materials say that 3 in 4 trans and gender diverse people have been treated unfairly because of their gender identity, as though a woman feeling uncomfortable when she perceives a man in a dress sharing a lift with her is treating that man unfairly, and she should stop and stay in the lift, hiding her natural response. So the messaging of the campaign is that your feelings are wrong and should be suppressed if they make another person feel not fully embraced for how they present themselves or who they claim to be, and this will, of course, disproportionately impact women and children. The Queensland Births, Deaths and Marriages Registration Act came into effect on the 24th of June. The law allows a person to alter their sex on legal documents, such as their birth certificate, and parents can also choose how they identify in their parenting role on their child's birth certificate. So a man, for instance, can list himself as mother on the child's birth certificate. And someone with court-ordered parental responsibility for a child can make applications on the child's own behalf as well. So that started 5 days ago. On the 20th of June, journalist Bernard Lane published the results of his FOI request that showed that Australia's health minister was advised by his staff on the 16th of April, after publication of the Cass review, that it was relevant to Australian gender treatment and that the Australian guidelines had failed review. The advice to the minister also provided general warnings regarding interventions such as puberty blockers, saying that there is, quote, a lack of robust evidence on the long-term benefits and outcomes. Since then, the minister has claimed that Cass is not relevant to Australia because of, quote, different care pathways. And a health department official told Parliament about a week ago, I think, that the Australian environment was different from the UK. Note that in 2023, our guidelines became even more lax and advised GPs to commence hormone therapy on teenagers without multidisciplinary backup or specialists, as long as they felt they had sufficient expertise or skill themselves. So this minister is the one that the Tasmanian government has asked to conduct an inquiry into child gender interventions instead of the Tasmanian government doing it itself. However, it's worth noting that they are of different political parties. A Colonial inquest into the suicides of 5 people who identified as trans in and around 2021 is ongoing in Victoria. Last week, it was expanded in response to findings that one man had been damaged by an orchiectomy procedure, so removal of the testicles, done by an inexperienced backyard operator, and that this damage may have contributed to the decision to suicide. The reporting has focused blame on the barriers to accessing these interventions through authorised medical providers, so that may be the eventual recommendation to make it easier to have the procedures. On the 3rd of June, the New South Wales Parliamentary Committee inquiring into the Omnibus Equality Bill, so that's the self-ID, surrogacy, prostitution, child medicalisation, etc., delivered its report after its inquiry and 2 days of hearings. It declined to give an opinion on the bill and referred it back to Parliament for debate. The 2-day hearing included women's groups, the Feminist Legal Clinic included, church groups, as well as pro-trans groups, and the committee's own public survey on the bill had 85% of respondents out of 13,258 respondents not support the bill. Only 13% of public respondents supported the bill. Louise Elliott, councillor on Hobart City Council, tried to book a council room in 2023 for a women's rights meeting in her private capacity. Her booking request and personal information was shared by the Lord Mayor with a pro-trans advocate. Now, that happens to be Rodney Croome, the one who brought the UN human rights case years ago against Tasmania's criminalisation of homosexuality. However, Croome is now more of a trans rights campaigner. Croome asked to meet with her and asked that she refuse the booking. Documents and emails showing this were then withheld from an FOI request. Elliott filed a complaint with the Tribunal for Discrimination, and conciliation resulted in a public apology from the council and compensation. Complaints regarding those breaches of privacy and FOI laws are ongoing, though, so we'll see how that turns out. The Australian Human Rights Commission held its free and equal conference on a proposed Federal Human Rights Act. The proposal for the Human Rights Act does not incorporate CEDAW. It focuses on 5 other human rights treaties, and it does not include sex-specific rights or the rights of women as a named rights area. An email was sent to speakers. There were 61 speakers at the conference. An email was sent to speakers regarding this omission of CEDAW, and one speaker responded. She said she was sure that the concerns regarding the omission of CEDAW and sex-based protections would be covered during the session on gender. They weren't. The panel consisted of 5 women and 1 man who presented himself as a trans woman, and Tickle and Giggle was discussed. I was not present, but I've heard reports that Giggle's actions were argued as an infringement on human rights example. President of the AHRC, Rosalind Croucher, is coming to the end of her term. Her replacement is Hugh de Kretser, former director of the Human Rights Law Centre and CEO of the Europe Justice Commission. De Kretser did support the 2013 amendments to the SDA and hasn't said anything that walks that back since. Equality Rights Alliance, which is a network of NFPs, they say coming together to advocate for gender equality and the human rights of, quote, women, girls, and people of marginalised genders, works with the federal government and the United Nations. The convener, Helen Daly-Fisher, has resigned. She'll be farewelled at the ERA conference this coming week. No news on her replacement yet, and actually, the YWCA has announced that it will not be receiving federal government funding to continue running the ERA in the future. We don't know why, but this means that the ERA will cease to exist in its current capacity unless it evolves into a body separate from the YWCA and obtains funding in some other way. So this could leave Australia without a peak coordination body for women's rights groups and a funding gap. There is currently a federal family court matter ongoing that challenges the outdated common law rules for children giving informed consent to medical interventions if the parents disagree. That is still ongoing. It was scheduled, I think, for 2 days and has now been running for about 5 weeks. This is the one that you may have read about in The Australian, where the 2 sisters made a pact for the younger to give the elder her eggs in the future because the elder had been told about the fertility impacts of testosterone. The Cass review has been argued in that court case by barrister Bell Lane, but the judge has refused to allow the report, my understanding is, to be admitted into evidence. There are also 2 other, I believe, family court matters looking at informed consent ongoing at the moment. 2 cases regarding the Sex Discrimination Act, that's Tickle and Giggle, which should have its judgment in July, maybe early August. And the Lesbian Action Group case, which is scheduled for September in the AAT. There's at least 1 vilification discrimination case on foot for misgendering. This one was criticising a man feeding his baby chemically stimulated nipple discharge. There's at least 1 wrongful dismissal matter, Gillian Spencer. I might be forgetting some, but there are a lot of matters to keep our eye on over the next 6 months. And 2 last bits of news, which are a little bit of a call for action if they relate to you. Dr. Cass is giving a webinar with the National Association of Practicing Psychiatrists on the 2nd of July in just a couple of days' time. And registration, I believe, is still possible, but there is a fee involved. And lastly, member of the New South Wales Legislative Council, Greg Donnelly, gave a speech in Parliament in support of women's sports, and he launched a public petition against the still on foot equality bill for New South Wales residents. The petition is hosted on the New South Wales Parliament website because it's an official parliamentary petition, so it is only open for New South Wales residents. It's open until the 10th of September though, so if you are a New South Wales resident, you may want to hop along and put your name on that. It's in response to the committee's handballing of the issue back to Parliament for, quote, further debate. So long, June, and thanks for all the fish.
And so long, Megan, and thanks for all the fish. Thank you so much. That was a fantastic wrap-up. I'd love to get one of those every month. Fantastic. Thank you
My pleasure.
so much.
Thanks very much.
It was great to have